Okay, in this YouTube, I want to encourage you to consider you could write an ebook. If anybody said, I can't write an ebook, it would have been me, because being dyslexic, I find writing so difficult. But it's interesting as you decide to do what you want to do and start, it's amazing what you can pull off. I've proved it. So there is an explosion of people writing ebooks at the moment. A lot of them are writing their own story, and that's a good place to start. Just starting is a good place to start. It's what I had to do against my brain saying, you can't write, why would you bother? And of course I've had a lot of help with a co-writer to sort out my poor writing style. But I did have something to say. And in the end, that's the question you've got to ask yourself. Have I got something to say, and do I want to say it? If you say yes to those two questions, then I'm going to encourage you to write an ebook, because it's so doable. With a computer, you don't have to worry about typesetters, you don't have to worry about publishers, you don't have to worry about printers. In fact, there is no excuse for you not to write. If you've got access to a computer, it's got a typing keyboard, it's got a spell checker, it's got a grammar checker. There's all sorts of things to make it really easy for you to do. Now, you need to write, in my view, I'm just going to look at my notes here, you need to write something that's you. I'll give you an example of one of my books. In fact, it's the only book out of all my books on gradedreading.com which is autobiographical in its genre. It's called 3 Circumnavigations. It starts with a description of forced landing an aircraft on a country road when the crankshaft failure blew the propeller off the front. And the reason that it starts off that way is it's a very unusual experience. And while it doesn't directly relate to 3 circumnavigations, it does relate to the point that one of the circumnavigations is a circumnavigation of Australia in a home-built aircraft called an RV4. That was done over 7 weeks, 46.5 hours flying time, and some people find that story written interesting. In the same autobiographical work is talking about circumnavigating South Island. Start with there's a part of dyslexia. I was going to say South Island, but what I really meant to say was circumnavigating Tasmania. Every 2 years, the Royal Hobart Yacht Club allows, we don't race around Tasmania, just a gaggle of boats go from port to port to port and circumnavigate Tasmania anti-clockwise. And it was a privilege to spend 8 weeks doing that with Ralph Curry and on his boat Tom Bowling. In fact, we did it twice. It was so much fun. And of course, Port Davies down in the southwest of Tasmania is absolute glorious place on earth. I've been to 31 countries and many places, and it's very, very unique place. And it's all described in this book, 3 Circumnavigations. If you've done it, you can write it. The third circumnavigation was after a description of our maiden offshore voyage from Hobart, New Zealand to Nelson, New Zealand, across the infamous Tasman Sea, which was flat as a pancake. We picked a weather cycle using a weather router, and then 1 year circumnavigating the South Island from port to port to port, and then doing all the internals of the South Island by a borrowed car. And it's basically our adventure of that 1 year's holiday, a privilege most people will never get. So why couldn't you write a story about what you did like that? It's not hard to do. And then the ebook doesn't have to be written to be a multi-million dollar seller. It can be just so that you keep the record for those you're close to. I've written another book which is called The Mystery of the Strongbox, and what I've done is I've drawn from the well, and what I'm going to suggest you do is start from what you know and move to what you don't know. So you draw from the well of your own experiences and write about that, and then as you're writing you get other ideas and you can go off and research them. For argument's sake, in that particular book I write about, fictionally, about a pilot bailing out of a Corsair, which was an American fighter aircraft in the late part of the Second World War, over the jungles of Borneo. Now, how can I write about that? Well, I sailed our 50-foot motor sailor right up the Kuching River, and we took a boat right up to Kapit, which is right up where the longhouses are, and we happened to be there staying in the longhouse as guests when there was a genuine Iban wedding. And to view an Iban wedding and all the Iban dancing and the procedures, the blood sacrifices and everything happening, and everybody trying to get everybody else drunk on rice wine, was a first-hand experience. And of course we wove that into the story, and it becomes so realistic because I've been there, and everything that I described we saw whilst we were in Borneo. Then in the same story we talk about how they raised the masts on sailing ships, and being a sailor and having done so much reading and looked at the Irwin Fox, which is the 8th oldest ship in the city of Nelson, on our travels, we learned by adding to what was in the well a bit of research, and we learned how they actually raised masts of ships. Nearly said the wrong word, didn't I? And then they had funny traditions, like they would get a virgin to pass water in the bilge so that there would be a blessing on the ship, and they trapped a penny under the main mast when they stood it, and how they actually stood a mast with ropes and tackles and men, and how dangerous it was. And of course this was all woven into the story because the mast actually traps something else, which is a part of the story, without giving too much of that particular story away. And when we go into all this sequence about the lighthouse keeper and the young girl having to take over the grandfather's duties because he's too old, too sick to do it, we know all about the prisms and how lighthouses work and how oil lighthouses worked in the old days, because in the circumnavigation of Tasmania we got a chance to actually go and look at some lighthouses and how they worked, and talk to the old lighthouse keepers, because it's all done, navigation is all done by GPS now, and lighthouses are there just to make sailors feel warm and cosy at night time. And I tell you what, seeing a lighthouse in the distance and knowing exactly where you are is very comforting on the night watch too. And then all the section in the story about the trustees and the old lady wanting her wishes to be fulfilled, so that things that she learned as a young girl as the lighthouse keeper were not lost and were kept in the family for the benefit of the family. Again, not giving too much of the story away, all came from me being a real estate agent in one part of my life and understanding the role of the trustees and what trustees do and how they do it. So I'm going to encourage you to consider to start from what you know, move to what you don't know. Research on the internet is as simple as looking at YouTube of the same subject that you want to write about. See what everybody else is saying about that subject, and look up article marketing sites. I use Enzine Article Marketing to do my own articles, and when I want to learn something about something, I will go and look at articles written by other article writers at that particular site. So you have no excuse not to write an ebook if you had it in your mind to want to. There is something for you to write about, which is what you know, and then if you have an imaginative mind, there's no reason why you can't branch out and write some other genre. I write bordering from explainable science fiction, which is not really science fiction, and some of the best books fit no genre at all, in dream bouncing, and that has got an audio sampler. So go and get the free audio sampling and have a wee listen to that to see if you like it on gradedreading.com. The free children's stories are there. They also give you an idea of that particular genre that I write to. But I specifically write right across all the genres, including this one, 3 Circumnavigations, which is autobiographical, because I want a shelf of books. If you want to be a successful author, you need to have more than one book, because your readers won't trust you as a new author with one book, because they don't want to be disappointed to find out that you're not the entertainment that they want. Halfway through, they haven't got time to spend 4 or 5 hours reading you to find out that you're not what you want. So the audio sampler does that for dream bouncing. It will be doing it for Four Bastard Sons to Iran, which is on the site but which is not co-written yet. And of course The Mystery of the Strongbox, which I've talked about, and 3 Circumnavigations are 2 other books that are there. And the advantage of having a shelf of books is it builds the fact that if you can build a shelf of books, you have some credibility as a writer. And the idea is to have different genres on that shelf, because not everybody will like a book that's structured like 3 Circumnavigations. They just want to read something that's exciting and fast-paced, and then they need to go to something like The Wasp and Frame, which is another one on my shelf, which is very racy work set in the Philippines inside a Filipino jail. How can I write about that? Aha! I've been in a Filipino jail. Not because I was convicted, but I've been there, and had a lot to do with people who were in the justice system. So it's all about how the justice system works or doesn't work or manipulated. And it's a fascinating read, but it's very fast-paced. It's completely different to The Strongbox, which is completely different to Dream Bouncing, which is completely different to Four Bastard Sons to Iran. And that is a skill of breaking out of obscurity as an ebook writer and actually making $1, which is having many books on your shelf that are of different genres, and then you build trust with your readers in one book, and then they go hunt out some of your other books, and then you start to get this viral effect and people talking about you as an author, and then you're away. So there's an encouragement to somebody that thinks, I can't write a book. You can, because if I can, anybody can. So that's all we're going to do for this particular YouTube video. It's goodbye from Ronald Sharp and gradedreading.com. Cheers.